I'm going to report on a case study of a program which has been set up to help rural populations in Mozambique, a largely agricultural country in Southeast Africa. The program worked with 3 communities in Chikwalakwala district, near the Limpopo River. This is a dry and arid region with unpredictable rainfall. Because of this, people in the area were unable to support themselves through agriculture, and instead they used the forest as a means of providing themselves with an income, mainly by selling charcoal. However, this was not a sustainable way of living in the long term, as they were rapidly using up this resource. To support agriculture in this dry region, the program focused primarily on making use of existing water resources from the Limpopo River by setting up systems of irrigation, which would provide a dependable water supply for crops and animals. The program worked closely with the district government in order to find the best way of implementing this. The region already had one farmers' association, and it was decided to set up 2 more of these. These associations planned and carried out activities including water management, livestock breeding and agriculture. And it was notable that in general, women formed the majority of the workforce. It was decided that in order to keep the crops safe from animals, both wild and domestic, special areas should be fenced off where the crops could be grown. The community was responsible for creating these fences, but the program provided the necessary wire for making them. Once the area had been fenced off, it could be cultivated. The land was dug so that vegetables and cereals appropriate to the climate could be grown, and the program provided the necessary seeds for this. The program also provided pumps so that water could be brought from the river in pipes to the fields. However, the labour was all provided by local people, and they also provided and put up the posts that supported the fences around the fields. Once the program had been set up, its development was monitored carefully. The farmers were able to grow enough produce not just for their own needs, but also to sell. However, getting the produce to places where it could be marketed was sometimes a problem, as the farmers did not have access to transport, and this resulted in large amounts of produce, especially vegetables, being spoiled. This problem was discussed with the farmers' associations, and it was decided that in order to prevent food from being spoiled, the farmers needed to learn techniques for its preservation. There was also an additional initiative that had not been originally planned, but which became a central feature of the program. This was when farmers started to dig holes for tanks in the fenced-off areas and to fill these with water and use them for breeding fish, an important source of protein. After a time, another suggestion was made by local people which hadn't been part of the program's original proposal, but which was also adopted later on. They decided to try setting up colonies of bees, which would provide honey both for their own consumption and to sell. So, what lessons can be learned from this programme? First of all, it tells us that in dry, arid regions, if there is access to a reliable source of water, there is great potential for the development of agriculture. In Chiqualaquala, there was a marked improvement in agricultural production, which improved food security and benefited local people by providing them with both food and income. However, it's important to set realistic timelines for each phase of the programme, especially for its design, as mistakes made at this stage may be hard to correct later on. The programme demonstrates that sustainable development is possible in areas.
OK, Graham, so let's check we both know what we're supposed to be doing.
OK.
So, for the university's open day, we have to plan a display on British life and literature in the mid-19th century.
That's right. But we'll have some people to help us find the materials and set it up, remember? For the moment, we just need to plan it.
Good. So, have you gathered who's expected to come and see the display? Is it for the people studying English or students from other departments? I'm not clear about it.
Nor me. That was how it used to be, but it didn't attract many people, so this year it's going to be part of an open day to raise the university's profile. It'll be publicised in the city to encourage people to come and find out something of what goes on here, and it's included in the information that's sent to people who are considering applying to study here next year.
Presumably some current students and lecturers will come?
I would imagine so. But we've been told to concentrate on the other categories of people.
Right. We don't have to cover the whole range of 19th century literature, do we?
No, it's entirely up to us. I suggest just using Charles Dickens.
That's a good idea. Most people have heard of him and have probably read some of his novels or seen films based on them. So that's a good lead-in to life in his time.
Exactly. And his novels show the awful conditions that most people had to live in, don't they? He wanted to shock people into doing something about it.
Did he do any campaigning other than writing?
Yes, he campaigned for education and other social reforms and gave talks. But I'm inclined to ignore that and focus on the novels.
Yes, I agree.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30.
OK, so now shall we think about a topic linked to each novel?
Yes, I've printed out a list of Dickens's novels in the order they were published, in the hope you'd agree to focus on him.
You're lucky I did agree. Let's have a look. OK, the first was The Pickwick Papers, published in 1836. It was very successful when it came out, wasn't it? And was adapted for the theatre straight away.
There's an interesting point, though, that there's a character who keeps falling asleep, and that medical condition was named after the book, Pickwickian syndrome.
Oh, so why don't we use that as the topic and include some quotations from the novel?
Right. Next is Oliver Twist.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot in the novel about poverty, but maybe something less obvious.
Well, Oliver is taught how to steal, isn't he? We could use that to illustrate the fact that very few children went to school, particularly not poor children, so they learnt in other ways.
Good idea. What's next?
Maybe Nicholas Nickleby? Actually, he taught in a really cruel school, didn't he?
That's right. But there's also the company of touring actors that Nicholas joins. We could do something on theatres and other amusements of the time. We don't want only the bad things, do we?
OK.
What about Martin Chuzzlewit? He goes to the USA, doesn't he?
Yes. And Dickens himself had been there a year before and drew on his experience there in the novel.
I wonder, though, The main theme is selfishness. So we could do something on social justice? No, too general. Let's keep to your idea. I think it would work well.
He wrote Bleak House next. That's my favourite of his novels.
Yes, mine too.
Oh,
His satire of the legal system is pretty powerful.
that's true. But think about Esther, the heroine. As a child, she lives with someone she doesn't know is her aunt, who treats her very badly. Then she's very happy living with her guardian, and he puts her in charge of the household. And at the end, she gets married, and her guardian gives her and her husband a house, where, of course, they're very happy.
Yes, I like that.
What shall we take next? Little Dorrit? Old Mr. Dorrit has been in a debtor's prison for years.
So was Dickens's father, wasn't he?
That's right.
What about focusing on the part when Mr. Dorrit inherits a fortune and he starts pretending he's always been rich?
Good idea.
OK. So next we need to think about what materials we want to illustrate each issue. That's going to be quite hard.
I'm very pleased to welcome this evening's guest speaker, Mark Logan, who's going to tell us about the recent transformation of Minster Park. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you. I'm sure you're all familiar with Minster Park. It's been a feature of the city for well over a century and has been the responsibility of the City Council for most of that time. What perhaps isn't so well known is the origin of the park. Unlike many public parks that started in private ownership, as the garden of a large house, for instance, Minster was some wasteland, which people living nearby started planting with flowers in 1892. It was unclear who actually owned the land, and this wasn't settled until 20 years later, when the council took possession of it. You may have noticed the statue near one of the entrances. It's of Diane Gosforth, who played a key role in the history of the park. Once the council had become the legal owner, it planned to sell the land for housing. Many local people wanted it to remain a place that everyone could go to enjoy the fresh air and natural environment. Remember, the park is in a densely populated residential area. Diane Gosforth was one of those people, and she organised petitions and demonstrations, which eventually made the council change its mind about the future of the land. Soon after this, the First World War broke out in 1914, and most of the park was dug up and planted with vegetables, which were sold locally. At one stage, the army considered taking it over for troop exercises and got as far as contacting the city council, then decided the park was too small to be of use. There were occasional public meetings during the war in an area that had been retained as grass. After the war, the park was turned back more or less to how it had been before 1914 and continued almost unchanged until recently. Plans for transforming it were drawn up at various times, most recently in 2013, though they were revised in 2015 before any work had started. The changes finally got going in 2016 and were finished on schedule last year. OK, let me tell you about some of the changes that have been made and some things that have been retained. If you look at this map, you'll see the familiar outline of the park, with the river forming the northern boundary, and a gate in each of the other three walls. The statue of Diane Gosforth has been moved. It used to be close to the south gate, but it's now immediately to the north of the lily pond, almost in the centre of the park, which makes it much more visible. There's a new area of wooden sculptures, which are on the riverbank, where the path from the east gate makes a sharp bend. there are two areas that are particularly intended for children. The playground has been enlarged and improved, and that's between the river and the path that leads from the pond to the river. Then there's a new maze, a circular series of paths separated by low hedges. That's near the West Gate. You go north from there towards the river and then turn left to reach it. There have been tennis courts in the park for many years, and they've been doubled, from 4 to 8. They're still in the southwest corner of the park, where there's a right-angle bend in the path. Something else I'd like to mention is the new fitness area. This is right next to the lily pond on the same side as the West Gate. Now, as you're all gardeners, I'm sure you'll like to hear about the plants that have been chosen for the park.
Good morning. You're through to the Tourist Information Office. Tim speaking. How can I help you?
Oh, hello. Could you give me some information about next month's festival, please? My family and I will be staying in the town that week.
Of course. Well, it starts with a concert on the afternoon of the 17th.
Oh, I heard about that. The orchestra and singers come from the USA, don't they?
They're from Canada. They're very popular over there. They're going to perform a number of well-known pieces that will appeal to children as well as adults.
That sounds good. My whole family are interested in music.
The next day, the 18th, there's a performance by a ballet company called Eustatis.
Sorry?
The name is spelt Eustatis. They appeared in last year's festival and went down very well. Again, their programme is designed for all ages.
Good. I expect we'll go to that. I hope there's going to be a play during the festival. A comedy, ideally.
You're in luck. On the 19th and 20th, a local amateur group are performing one written by a member of the group. It's called Jemima. That'll be on in the town hall. They've already performed it 2 or 3 times. I haven't seen it myself, but the review in the local paper was very good.
And is it suitable for children?
Yes. In fact, it's aimed more at children than at adults. So both performances are in the afternoon.
And what about dance? Will there be any performances?
Yes, also on the 20th, but in the evening. A professional company is putting on a show of modern pieces with electronic music by young composers.
Uh-huh.
The show is about how people communicate, or fail to communicate with each other, so it's got the rather strange name, Chat.
I suppose that's because that's something we do both face-to-face and online.
That's right. Now, there are also some workshops and other activities. They'll all take place at least once every day, so everyone who wants to take part will have a chance.
Good. We're particularly interested in cookery. You don't happen to have a cookery workshop, do you?
We certainly do. It's going to focus on how to make food part of a healthy lifestyle. And it'll show that even sweet things like cakes can contain much less sugar than they usually do.
That might be worth going to. We're trying to encourage our children to cook.
Another workshop is just for children, and that's on creating posters to reflect the history of the town. The aim is to make children aware of how both the town and people's lives have changed over the centuries. The results will be exhibited in the community centre. Then, the other workshop is in toy making, and that's for adults only.
Oh, why's that?
Because it involves carpentry. Participants will be making toys out of wood, so there'll be a lot of sharp chisels and other tools around.
It makes sense to keep children away from it.
Exactly. Now, let me tell you about some of the outdoor activities. There'll be supervised wild swimming.
Wild swimming? What's that?
It just means swimming in natural waters, rather than a swimming pool.
Oh, OK. In a lake, for instance?
Yes. There's a beautiful one just outside the town, and that'll be the venue for the swimming. There'll be lifeguards on duty, so it's suitable for all ages. And finally, there'll be a walk in some nearby woods every day. The leader is an expert on insects. He'll show some that live in the woods and how important they are for the environment. So there are going to be all sorts of different things to do during the festival.
There certainly are.
If you'd like to read about how the preparations for the festival are going, the festival organizer is keeping a blog. Just search online for the festival website and you'll find it.
Well, thank you very much for all the information.
You're welcome. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Today, I'm going to talk about the eucalyptus tree. This is a very common tree here in Australia, where it's also sometimes called the gum tree. First, I'm going to talk about why it's important. Then I'm going to describe some problems it faces at present. Right, well, the eucalyptus tree is an important tree for lots of reasons. For example, it gives shelter to creatures like birds and bats, and these and other species also depend on it for food, particularly the nectar from its flowers. So it supports biodiversity. It's useful to us humans too, because we can kill germs with a disinfectant made from oil extracted from eucalyptus leaves. The eucalyptus grows all over Australia, and the trees can live for up to 400 years. So it's alarming that all across the country, numbers of eucalyptus are falling because the trees are dying off prematurely. So what are the reasons for this? One possible reason is disease. As far back as the 1970s, the trees started getting a disease called Mundula yellows. The tree's leaves would gradually turn yellow, then the tree would die. It wasn't until 2004 that they found the cause of the problem was lime, or calcium hydroxide, to give it its proper chemical name, which was being used in the construction of roads. The lime was being washed away into the ground and affecting the roots of the eucalyptus trees nearby. What it was doing was preventing the trees from sucking up the iron they needed for healthy growth. When this was injected back into the affected trees, they immediately recovered. But this problem only affected a relatively small number of trees. By 2000, huge numbers of eucalyptus were dying along Australia's east coast of a disease known as bell miner-associated dieback. The bell miner is a bird, and the disease seems to be common where there are high populations of bell miners. Again, it's the leaves of the trees that are affected. What happens is that insects settle on the leaves and eat their way round them, destroying them as they go, and at the same time they secrete a solution which has sugar in it. The bell miner birds really like this solution, and in order to get as much as possible, they keep away other creatures that might try to get it. So these birds and insects flourish at the expense of other species, and eventually so much damage is done to the leaves that the tree dies. But experts say that trees can start looking sick before any sign of bell miner-associated dieback. So it looks as if the problem might have another explanation. One possibility is that it's to do with the huge bushfires that we have in Australia. A theory proposed over 40 years ago by ecologist William Jackson is that the frequency of bushfires in a particular region affects the type of vegetation that grows there. If there are very frequent bushfires in a region, this encourages grass to grow afterwards, while if the bushfires are rather less frequent, this results in the growth of eucalyptus forests. So why is this? Why do fairly frequent bushfires actually support the growth of eucalyptus? Well, one reason is that the fire stops the growth of other species which would consume water needed by eucalyptus trees. And there's another reason. If these other quick-growing species of bushes and plants are allowed to proliferate, they harm the eucalyptus in another way by affecting the composition of the soil and removing nutrients from it. So some bushfires are actually essential for the eucalyptus to survive as long as they are not too frequent. In fact, there's evidence that Australia's Indigenous people practiced regular burning of bushland for thousands of years before the arrival of the Europeans. But since Europeans arrived on the continent, the number of bushfires has been strictly controlled. Now, scientists believe that this reduced frequency of bushfires to low levels has led to what's known as dry rainforest, which seems an odd name as usually we associate tropical rainforest with wet conditions. And what's special about this type of rainforest? Well, unlike tropical rainforest, which is a rich ecosystem, this type of ecosystem is usually a simple one. It has very thick, dense vegetation, but not much variety of species. The vegetation provides lots of shade, so one species that does find it ideal is the bell myna bird, which builds its nests in the undergrowth there. But again, that's not helpful for the eucalyptus tree.
That
Ed, how are you getting on with the reading for our presentation next week?
Well, okay, Ruth, but there's so much of it.
I know. I hadn't realised birth order was such a popular area of research.
But the stuff on birth order and personality is mostly unreliable. From what I've been reading, a lot of the claims about how your position in the family determines certain personality traits are just stereotypes, with no robust evidence to support them.
OK, but that's an interesting point. We could start by outlining what previous research has shown. There are studies going back over 100 years.
Yeah, so we could just run through some of the typical traits. Like the consensus seems to be that oldest children are generally less well-adjusted because they never get over the arrival of a younger sibling.
Right, but on a positive note, some studies claim that they were thought to be good at nurturing. Certainly in the past, when people had large families, they would have been expected to look after the younger ones.
There isn't such a clear picture for middle children, but one trait that a lot of the studies mention is that they are easier to get on with than older or younger siblings.
Generally eager to please and helpful, although that's certainly not accurate as far as my family goes. My middle brother was a nightmare, always causing fights and envious of whatever I had.
As I said, none of this seems to relate to my own experience. I'm the youngest in my family, and I don't recognise myself in any of the studies I've read about. I'm supposed to have been a sociable and confident child who made friends easily, but I was actually terribly shy.
Really? That's funny. There have been hundreds of studies on twins, but mostly about nurture versus nature.
There was one on personality which said that a twin is likely to be quite shy in social situations, because they always have their twin around to depend on for support.
My cousins were like that when they were small. They were only interested in each other and found it hard to engage with other kids. They're fine now, though.
Only children have had a really bad press. A lot of studies have branded them as loners who think the world revolves around them because they've never had to fight for their parents' attention.
That does seem a bit harsh. One category I hadn't considered before was children with much older siblings. A couple of studies mentioned that these children grow up more quickly and are expected to do basic things for themselves, like getting dressed.
I can see how that might be true, although I expect they're sometimes the exact opposite, playing the baby role and clamouring for special treatment.
What was the problem with most of these studies, do you think?
I think it was because, in a lot of cases, data was collected from only one sibling per family, who rated him or herself and his or her siblings at the same time.
Some of the old research into the relationship between birth order and academic achievement has been proved to be accurate, though. Performances in intelligence tests declined slightly from the eldest child to his or her younger siblings. This has been proved in lots of recent studies.
Yes, although what many of them didn't take into consideration was family size. The more siblings there are, the likelier the family is to have a low socio-economic status, which can also account for differences between siblings in academic performance.
The oldest boy might be given more opportunities than his younger sisters, for example.
Exactly.
But the main reason for the marginally higher academic performance of oldest children is quite surprising, I think. It's not only that they benefit intellectually from extra attention at a young age, which is what I would have expected. It's that they benefit from being teachers for their younger siblings by verbalising processes.
Right. And this gives them status and confidence, which again contributes in a small way to better performance. So, would you say sibling rivalry has been a useful thing for you?
I think so. My younger brother was incredibly annoying, and we fought a lot. But I think this has made me a stronger person. I know how to defend myself. We had some terrible arguments, and I would have died rather than apologise to him. But we had to put up with each other, and most of the time we coexisted amicably enough.
Yes, my situation was pretty similar. But I don't think having two older brothers made me any less selfish. I was never prepared to let my brothers use any of my stuff.
Good morning. My name's Erica Matthews, and I'm the owner of Matthews Island Holidays, a company set up by my parents. Thank you for coming to this presentation, in which I hope to interest you in what we have to offer. We're a small family-run company, and we believe in the importance of the personal touch. So we don't aim to compete with other companies on the number of customers. What we do is build on our many years' experience, more than almost any other rail holiday company, to ensure we provide perfect holidays in a small number of destinations, which we've got to know extremely well. I'll start with our 6-day Isle of Man holiday. This is a fascinating island in the Irish Sea, with Wales to the south, England to the east, Scotland to the north, and Northern Ireland to the west. Our holiday starts in Heysham, where your tour manager will meet you. Then you'll travel by ferry to the Isle of Man. Some people prefer to fly from Luton instead, and another popular option is to go by train to Liverpool and take a ferry from there. You have 5 nights in the hotel, and the price covers 5 breakfasts and dinners, and lunch on the 3 days when there are organised trips. Day 4 is free, and most people have lunch in a cafe or restaurant in Douglas. The price of the holiday includes the ferry to the Isle of Man, all travel on the island, the hotel, and the meals I've mentioned. Incidentally, we try to make booking our holidays as simple and fair as possible, so unlike with many companies, the price is the same whether you book 6 months in advance or at the last minute, and there's no supplement for single rooms in hotels. If you make a booking, then need to change the start date, for example because of illness, you're welcome to change to an alternative date or a different tour for a small administrative fee. Okay, so what does the holiday consist of? Well, on day 1, you'll arrive in time for a short introduction by your tour manager, followed by dinner in the hotel. The dining room looks out at the river, close to where it flows into the harbour, and there's usually plenty of activity going on. On day 2, you'll take the coach to the small town of Peel, on the way calling in at the Tynwald exhibition. The Isle of Man isn't part of the United Kingdom, and it has its own parliament called Tynwald. It's claimed that this is the world's oldest parliament that's still functioning, and that it dates back to 979. However, the earliest surviving reference to it is from 1422, so perhaps it isn't quite as old as it claims. Day 3, we have a trip to the mountain Snaefell. This begins with a leisurely ride along the promenade in Douglas in a horse-drawn tram. Then you board an electric train which takes you to the fishing village of Laxey. From there, it's an 8-kilometre ride in the Snaefell Mountain Railway to the top. Lunch will be in the cafe, giving you spectacular views of the island. Day 4 is free for you to explore, using the pass which we'll give you. So you won't have to pay for travel on local transport or for entrance to the island's heritage sites. Or you might just want to take it easy in Douglas and perhaps do a little light shopping. The last full day, Day 5, is for some people the highlight of the holiday, with a ride on the steam railway from Douglas to Port Erin. After some time to explore, a coach will take you to the headland that overlooks the Calf of Man, a small island just off the coast. From there, you continue to Castletown, which used to be the capital of the Isle of Man and its medieval castle. And on Day 6, it's back to the ferry, or the airport if you flew to the island, and time to go home.
Hello, William. This is Amber. You said to phone if I wanted to get more information about the job agency you mentioned. Is now a good time?
Hi, Amber. Yes, fine. So the agency I was talking about is called Bankside. They're based in Docklands. I can tell you the address now. 497 East Side.
OK, thanks. So is there anyone in particular I should speak to there?
The agent I always deal with is called Becky Jameson.
Let me write that down. Becky...
Jameson. Jameson.
Do you have her direct line?
Yes, it's in my contacts somewhere. Right, here we are. 07866 510 333. I wouldn't call her until the afternoon if I were you. She's always really busy in the morning trying to fill last-minute vacancies. She's really helpful and friendly, so I'm sure it would be worth getting in touch with her for an informal chat.
It's mainly clerical and admin jobs they deal with, isn't it?
That's right. I know you're hoping to find a full-time job in the media eventually, but Becky mostly recruits temporary staff for the finance sector, which will look good on your CV, and generally pays better too.
Yeah, I'm just a bit worried because I don't have much office experience.
I wouldn't worry. They'll probably start you as a receptionist or something like that. So what's important for that kind of job isn't so much having business skills or knowing lots of different computer systems, it's communication that really matters, so you'd be fine there. And you'll pick up office skills really quickly on the job. It's not that complicated.
OK, good. So how long do people generally need temporary staff for? It would be great if I could get something lasting at least a month.
That shouldn't be too difficult. But you're more likely to be offered something for a week at first, which might get extended. It's unusual to be sent somewhere for just a day or two.
Right. I've heard the pay isn't too bad. Better than working in a shop or a restaurant.
Oh, yes, definitely. The hourly rate is about £10, $11 if you're lucky.
That's pretty good. I was only expecting to get £8 or £9 an hour.
The registration process?
Yes, please. I know you have to have an interview.
The interview usually takes about an hour, and you should arrange that about a week in advance.
I suppose I should dress smartly if it's for office work. I can probably borrow a suit from Mum.
Good idea. It's better to look too smart than too casual.
Will I need to bring copies of my exam certificates or anything like that?
No, they don't need to see those, I don't think.
What about my passport?
Oh, yes, they will ask to see that.
OK.
I wouldn't get stressed about the interview, though. It's just a chance for them to build a relationship with you, so they can try and match you to a job which you'll like. So there are questions about personality that they always ask candidates, fairly basic ones, and they probably won't ask anything too difficult, like what your plans are for the future.
Hope not.
Anyway, there are lots of benefits to using an agency. For example, the interview will be useful because they'll give you feedback on your performance so you can improve next time.
And they'll have access to jobs which aren't advertised.
Exactly. Most temporary jobs aren't advertised.
And I expect finding a temporary job this way takes a lot less time. It's much easier than ringing up individual companies.
Yes, indeed.
Hi, Rob. How's the course going?
Oh, hi, Mia. Yeah, great. I can't believe the first term's nearly over.
I saw your group's performance last night at the student theatre. It was good.
Really? Yeah, but now we have to write a report on the whole thing, an in-depth analysis. I don't know where to start. Like, I have to write about the role I played, the doctor, how I developed the character.
Well, what was your starting point?
My grandfather was a doctor before he retired, and I just based it on him.
OK, but how? Did you talk to him about it?
He must have all sorts of stories, but he never says much about his work, even now. He has a sort of authority, though.
So, how did you manage to capture that?
I'd visualise what he must have been like in the past when he was sitting in his consulting room listening to his patients.
OK, so that's what you explain in your report.
Right.
Then there's the issue of atmosphere. So in the first scene we needed to know how boring life was in the doctor's village in the 1950s. So when the curtain went up on the first scene in the waiting room, there was that long silence before anyone spoke. And then people kept saying the same thing over and over, like, cold, isn't it?
Yes, and everyone wore grey and brown and just sat in a row.
Yes, all those details of the production.
And I have to analyse how I functioned in the group, what I found out about myself. I know I was so frustrated at times when we couldn't agree.
Yes. So did one person emerge as the leader?
Sophia did. That was okay. She helped us work out exactly what to do for the production, and that made me feel better, I suppose.
When you understood what needed doing?
Yes. And Sophia did some research too. That was useful in developing our approach.
Like what?
Well, she found these articles from the 1950s about how relationships between children and their parents, or between the public and people like bank managers or the police, were shifting.
Interesting. And did you have any practical problems to overcome?
Well, in the final rehearsal, everything was going fine until the last scene. That's where the doctor's first patient appears on stage on his own.
The one in the wheelchair?
Yes, and he had this really long speech with the stage all dark except for one spotlight. And then that stuck somehow, so it was shining on the wrong side of the stage. But anyway, we got that fixed, thank goodness.
Yes, it was fine on the night.
But while you're here, Mia, I wanted to ask you about the year abroad option. Would you recommend doing that?
Yes, definitely. It's a fantastic chance to study in another country for a year.
I think I'd like to do it, but it looks very competitive. There's only a limited number of places.
Yes. So, next year, when you're in the second year of the course, you need to work really hard in all your theatre studies modules. Only students with good marks get places. You have to prove that you know your subject really well.
Right. So how did you choose where to go?
Well, I decided I wanted a programme that would fit in with what I wanted to do after I graduate. So I looked for a university with emphasis on acting rather than directing, for example. It depends on you. Then about 6 months before you go, you have to email the scheme coordinator with your top 3 choices. I had a friend who missed the deadline and didn't get her first choice, so you do need to get a move on at that stage. You'll find that certain places are very popular with everyone.
And don't you have to write a personal statement at that stage?
Yes.
Right. I'll get some of the final year students to give me some tips. Maybe see if I can read what they wrote.
I think that's a very good idea. I don't mind showing you what I did. And while you're abroad, don't make the mistake I made. I got so involved I forgot all about making arrangements for when I came back here for the final year. Make sure you stay in touch so they know your choices for the optional modules. You don't want to miss out doing your preferred specialisms.
Right.
Today, I want to talk about self-regulatory focus theory and how the actions of leaders can affect the way followers approach different situations. Self-regulatory focus theory is a theory developed by Torrey Higgins. He says that a person's focus at any given time is to either approach pleasure or avoid pain. These are two basic motivations that each and every one of us has, and they cause us to have different kinds of goals. Promotion goals in different life situations emphasize achievement. Prevention goals are oriented towards the avoidance of punishment. In a specific situation, our thoughts might focus more on promotion goals or more on prevention goals. The theory suggests that two factors affect which goals we are focusing on. First, there is a chronic factor. This factor is connected to a person's personality and says that each person has a basic tendency to either focus more on promotion goals or focus more on prevention goals as part of his or her personality. Second, there is a situational factor, which means that the context we are in can make us more likely to focus on one set of goals or the other. For example, we are more likely to be thinking about pleasure and to have promotion goals when we are spending time with a friend. In contrast, if we are working on an important project for our boss, we are more likely to try to avoid making mistakes and therefore have more prevention goals in our mind. Research has shown that the goals we are focusing on at a given time affect the way we think. For example, when focusing on promotion goals, people consider their ideal self, their aspirations and gains. They don't think about what they can lose, so they think in a happier mode. They feel more inspired to change. When people are focusing on prevention goals, they think about their ought self. What are they supposed to be? What are people expecting from them? They consider their obligations to others. As a result, they experience more anxiety and try to avoid situations where they could lose. Now that I have talked about the two focuses and how they affect people, I want to look at the idea that the way leaders behave, or their style of leading, can affect the focus that followers adopt in a specific situation. In talking about leadership, we often mention transformational leaders and transactional leaders. Transformational leaders, when interacting with their followers, focus on their development. In their words and actions, transformational leaders highlight change. Their speech is passionate and conveys a definitive vision. All of these things can encourage followers to think about what could be. In other words, they inspire a promotion focus in their followers. In contrast, transactional leaders focus on developing clear structures that tell their followers exactly what is expected of them. While they do explain the rewards people will get for following orders,
they emphasize more how a follower will be punished or that a follower won't get rewarded if his or her behavior doesn't change. In short, they emphasize the consequences of making a mistake. This emphasis will clearly lead followers to focus on avoiding punishment and problems. This is clearly a prevention focus. In conclusion, it is important to understand that one focus is not necessarily better than the other one. For a designer who works in a field where a lot of innovation is needed, a promotion focus is probably better. In contrast, a prevention focus, which causes people to work more cautiously and produce higher quality work, might be very appropriate for a job like a surgeon, for example. The main point of the research, though, is that the actions of leaders can greatly influence whether people approach a situation with more of a promotion focus or more of a prevention focus.
Good morning. Welcome to the Early Learning Childcare Centre. How may I help you?
Hi, I spoke to you last week about enrolling my daughter for next year.
Oh, yes. I'll just get some details from you. So, you're her mother?
That's right.
And can I have your name?
It's Carol Smith.
The parent's name is Carol Smith, so Smith has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Good morning. Welcome to the Early Learning Childcare Centre. How may I help you?
Hi, I spoke to you last week about enrolling my daughter for next year.
Oh, yes. I'll just get some details from you. So, you're her mother?
That's right.
And can I have your name?
It's Carol Smith.
And your daughter's name?
It's Kate.
Now, we have several groups at the centre and we cater for children from 3 to 5 years old. How old is your daughter?
She's 3 now, but she turns 4 next month.
I'll put 4 down because that's how old she'll be when she starts.
Fine. She's so excited about her birthday and coming to the centre.
Oh, that's good to hear. And what's your address?
It's 46 Wombat Road. That's WOMBAT. Woodside 4032.
And what's the phone number?
Oh, it's 3345 9865.
So, have you decided on the days you would like to bring your daughter here?
I'd prefer Monday and Wednesday if possible.
I'll check. Monday's fine, but I think the centre is already full for Wednesday. Yes. Sorry, it seems to be a very popular day. We can offer you a Thursday or a Friday as well.
Oh dear. I suppose Thursday would be all right because she has swimming on Friday.
OK, got that. Because a lot of parents work, we do offer flexible start and finish times. We're open from 7:30 in the morning until 6 o'clock at night. What time would you like your daughter to start?
I need to get to work in the city by 9, so I'll drop her off at 8:30. You're pretty close to the city here, so that should give me plenty of time to get there.
That's fine. Now, we also need to decide which group she'll be in. We have 2 different groups and they're divided up according to age. There's the green group, which is for 3 to 4-year-olds, and then there's the red group, which is for 4 to 5-year-olds.
She's quite mature for her age and she can already write her name and read a little.
Well, I'll put her in the red group and we can always change her to the green one if there are any problems.
That sounds fine.
OK, let's move on to meals. We can provide breakfast, lunch and dinner. As she's finishing pretty early, she won't need dinner. Will you give her breakfast before she comes?
Yes, she'll only need lunch.
Now, does she have any medical conditions we need to know about? Does she have asthma or any hearing problems, for example?
No, but she does need to wear glasses.
Oh, I'll make a note of that.
Yeah, she's pretty good about wearing them. She can't see much without them.
Right. OK. Now, I also need emergency contact details.
So what sort of information do you need?
Just the name and number of a friend or family member we can contact in case we can't get hold of you at any time.
OK. That'd better be my sister, Jenny Ball.
Uh-huh.
That's B-A-L-L. Her phone number is 33467523.
Great. So she is the child's aunt?
Yes, that's right.
I'll make a note of that as well. Now, is there anything you'd like to ask?
What about payment? How much are the fees each term?
Well, for 2 days and the hours you've chosen, that will be $450 altogether.
OK, and do I have to pay that now?
No, we send out invoices once the children start at the centre. You can choose to pay at the end of each term, or we do offer a slightly discounted rate if you pay every month.
Oh, I'll do that then. I find it easier to budget that way, and I'm not used to the term dates just yet.
Good. It makes it a lot simpler for us as well. Well, that's everything. Would you like me to show you around the centre? We can go.
Today we're pleased to have on the show Alice Bussell from the Dolphin Conservation Trust. Tell us about the trust, Alice.
Well, obviously its purpose is to protect dolphins in seas all around the world. It tries to raise people's awareness of the problems these marine creatures are suffering because of pollution and other threats. It started 10 years ago and it's one of the fastest growing animal charities in the country, although it's still fairly small compared with the big players in animal protection. We're particularly proud of the work we do in education. Last year, we visited a huge number of schools in different parts of the country, going round to talk to children and young people aged from 5 to 18. In fact, about 35% of our members are children.
Oh.
The charity uses its money to support campaigns, for example, for changes in fishing policy and so forth. It hopes soon to be able to employ its first full-time biologist with dolphin expertise to monitor populations. Of course, many people give their services on a voluntary basis, and we now have volunteers working in observation, office work and other things. I should also tell you about the award we won from the Charity Commission last year for our work in education. Although it's not meant an enormous amount of money for us, it has made our activities even more widely publicised and understood. In the long term, it may not bring in extra members, but we're hoping it'll have this effect.
Is it possible to see dolphins in UK waters?
Yes, in several locations. And we have a big project in the east part of Scotland. This has long been a haven for dolphins because it has very little shipping. However, that may be about to change soon because oil companies want to increase exploration there. We're campaigning against this because although there'll be little pollution from oil, exploration creates a lot of underwater noise. It means the dolphins can't rest and socialise. This is how I became interested in dolphin conservation in the first place. I had never seen one, and I hadn't been particularly interested in them at school. Then I came across this story about a family of dolphins who had to leave their home in the Moray Firth because of the oil companies, and about a child who campaigned to save them. I couldn't put the book down. I was hooked.
I'm sure our listeners will want to find out what they can do to help. You mentioned the Adopt a Dolphin scheme. Can you tell us about that?
Of course. People can choose one of our dolphins to sponsor. They receive a picture of it and news updates. I'd like to tell you about 4 which are currently being adopted by our members: Moondancer, Echo, Kiwi and Samson. Unfortunately, Echo is being rather elusive this year and hasn't yet been sighted by our observers, but we remain optimistic that he'll be out there soon. All the others have been out in force. Samson and Moondancer are often photographed together, but it's Kiwi who's our real character, as she seems to love coming up close for the cameras, and we've captured her on film hundreds of times. They all have their own personalities. Moondancer is very elegant and curves out and into the water very smoothly, whereas Samson has a lot of energy. He's always leaping out of the water with great vigour. You'd probably expect him to be the youngest. He's not quite. That's Kiwi. But Samson's the latest of our dolphins to be chosen for the scheme. Kiwi makes a lot of noise, so we can often pick her out straight away. Echo and Moondancer are noisy too, but Moondancer's easy to find because she has a particularly large fin on her back, which makes her easy to identify. So, yes, they're all very different.
Well, they sound a fascinating group. And how would you go about...